Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Never Have I Ever season 2. Let's talk about it. So Never Have I Ever season 2 is the follow-up season to the first season, which came out last year at the beginning of lockdown that had millions of people around the world tuning in on Netflix to watch the story of this Indian American teenage girl who had gone through the loss of her father and was trying to figure out how to live her teenage girl life whilst at the same time facing this devastating loss that had several traumatic and psychological effects on her. Now, this series was created by Mindy Kaling as well as Lang Fisher acting as the writer on a lot of these episodes. And I think what made this series stand out from the crowd, from the literal ocean of Netflix shows that focus on teenage dramas, is the fact that we do have that unique angle, the unique perspective of the fact that she's an Indian American teenager, which is something that we don't really see represented in this subgenre. Teenagers from different ethnic groups tend to act as the side characters, the supporting cast, in stories that focus on the main character who tends to be white. And so the fact that this series focused on this Indian American girl was a very unique thing. Unfortunately, it's completely underrepresented in this subgenre. And on top of that, another special element of this show was its exploration of loss. You know, someone who had faced this huge loss in the form of the death of her father, and having been there as well, it had such a traumatic effect on her to the point where her body convinced itself that she was paralyzed. And you see these traumas and these psychological effects manifest physiologically, and that was the unique angle as well that was explored in the first season of the show that I think had millions of people around the world really invested in this character and her story. And on top of that, the series overall is just really cute, it's really charming, it's funny, and you get to really enjoy the characters that you see on screen. I mean, we'll talk about Devy we'll talk about Devy and like her whole situation, the mess that surrounds her in a minute, but for the most part I think people were really invested in the characters and their interactions, the family dynamic at play here as well. And I think going into season 2 we wanted to explore more of that, you know, the unique elements of this series. And whilst I think for the most part season 2 does so successfully, I would say that unfortunately some parts of season 2 felt like it lost sight of what made the series special and unique in, again, the ocean the ocean of teenage dramas that exist on the platform. But before we delve into my thoughts on season 2 of Never Have I Ever, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, let's get into this. So first of all, one thing that I couldn't help but notice is, as I mentioned, one of the unique aspects of this series is that it delves into the experiences of an Indian American teenage girl. And as I mentioned, this is very underrepresented in this subgenre of film and television. So I was super excited to see what they would do here. And when it comes to the first season, I loved the exploration of Indian culture within this story. Being able to see Devy and her family and how they interacted with the rest of the Indian community in California was really interesting to me. And I feel like, again, it was a unique aspect of the show, but unfortunately that's kind of pulled back a little bit in this season. Now, that's not to say that I expect the show to teach me everything about Indian culture within its 10 episodes, like absolutely not, but I liked the fact that more of it was incorporated in the first season, and seeing, you know, the religious aspects, but also seeing some of the familial aspects in terms of, you know, the relationship that Devy has with her mother. I feel like that was a really interesting insight into an Indian American home that is kind of lost a little bit in this season. Now, this season picks up right where we left off in season 1, and at the end of season 1 it was established that Devy's mother had decided that they were going to move back to India at least for another couple of years before Devy would move back to go to a college in America. But that's kind of dropped very quickly. That whole storyline, that whole plot twist is dropped quite quickly, but instead what we do get is Devy's grandmother visiting visiting from India, and she lives with them for a few months. And a positive of that is that we do get to see Devy interact with her traditional Indian grandmother, which is nice, and again it gives us an insight into her roots a little bit more. But other than that, as I mentioned, exploring her Indian heritage really does take a back seat in this season in favor of kind of delving into more classic stereotypical teenage drama tropes, which I think is a little bit of a shame. And as I mentioned before, the second aspect of the series that I feel like made it so unique within this subgenre was the added element of Devy trying to cope and trying to deal with the loss of her father. In the first season, we really got to see how the loss of Devy's father impacted her in all of these different kinds of ways, to the point that it manifested physiologically as well as within her behavioral patterns. And at the same time, we also saw how it impacted the relationship that she has with her mother. It created a lot of tension there because it seemed as though she was much closer to her father to begin with, but with him kind of lost as the mediator in the family, you had these two hot heads butting heads oftentimes, and it created a very turbulent relationship between mother and daughter. And I really loved that aspect, you know, being explored in the first season. I think they did a really good job of that. I feel like one aspect that this series really dared to delve into is having a main character who isn't always likable. She isn't always likable. Listen, the thing is about Devy is that she suffers from classic I'm the main character itis in a teenage drama, where she's making dumb decisions, where she's not always, you know, very considerate of the people around her. She's quite selfish, self-centered. Okay, we already know that that's the case when it comes to these main characters in these teenage dramas. Just by virtue of being the main character, that's going to happen. But in the case of Devy, it seemed as though it was particularly grating, especially because she also has these anger management issues that are stemmed from the trauma and the loss from her father that she's not quite dealing with properly. So it does make her a bit more of an abrasive character, even if she's already a main character in this series, and that was, you know, par for the course when it comes to this kind of character. Even more so when you add in the psychological impact of her losing her father at this already turbulent time in her life. But as a result, when you take that into account, when you consider the already turbulent relationship that Devy had with her mother, it was always going to be a bit of a mess. This season around, we do see that things have kind of calmed down a little bit, and, you know, both Devy and her mother have kind of tried to understand each other a little bit better, try to understand the perspective that they're coming from, and try to keep the peace in their household, to the point where Devy no longer has to move to India. As I mentioned, that storyline is dropped real quick. But at the same time, Devy's mother is still an Asian mother, okay? She's still a strict mother, so she doesn't want Devy rolling around with boys, okay, getting a nose piercing as she does in this season. And I really do love the fact that they twisted the nose piercing thing to be like, oh, she's just getting in touch with her Indian heritage. That is one aspect of Asian culture, I guess, that this series always touches on, is the kind of stereotypical strict Asian parents, and it is something that I do enjoy seeing. And again, it's rare in this subgenre because oftentimes the white parents are way more lax. But similarly with the case of Devy's Indian heritage and culture taking a back seat in this season, we do also see that to be the case for the exploration of, you know, Devy dealing with the psychological impacts of her father's death. We do get that constant motif of her listening to her father's voicemail. I think the last voicemail that she got from him, until of course she unfortunately loses her phone, and this was kind of an emotional crutch that she had, and all of a sudden that being taken away from her really did have a detrimental impact. So we do still see that the character turns to her father and tries to speak to him from beyond the grave whenever she's feeling low or lost in her life. That is a staple for the character, but again, they don't really delve into how she's coping and dealing with the loss of her father. And considering the fact that this is supposed to take place, you know, pretty much moments after the events of season 1, and she and her mother had literally just let go of her father's ashes at the beach, it's surprising to see how little his death actually plays a role in this season's storyline. But one way in which her father's death does play a role in this season's story is with her relationship with her mother after she finds out that her mother may be seeing someone. Listen, her mother has this rivalry with Common, okay, who is another dermatologist in her building. He's a very established, very popular dermatologist. And at first she sees him as being all style and no substance, but then they get to know each other and they have a lot of common ground. And she starts developing a little bit of a relationship with him. And you know, at first she's quite reluctant. She just lost her husband. She doesn't want to dive into anything too quickly. She ends up going on a date with Common, except Devy is like literally on the roof watching them. It turns into this huge fight where Devy feels betrayed that her mother would see someone else just so soon after her father died. And so you do get that aspect of, you know, both women trying to deal with the loss of this paternal figure in the family. But other than that, in terms of Devy's like exploits as a teenage girl and in teenage girldom, it doesn't really play as much of a role this season. Okay, so now let's delve into the teenage girl of it all. Now let's delve into what Devy was up to back in school, okay, back with her friends and her two boyfriends. Because yes, the beginning of the season opens up with Devy two-timing both Paxton and Ben. And honestly, like, why? Like, oh, she got too greedy. She got too greedy. For the first time, she had all of this male attention and she was like, oh, I want it all. And to me, it was a little bit of a shame because, like I said, Devy's already a bit of an abrasive character, okay? So it kind of sucks that they put her in the position where she was two-timing these guys. And also, like, have we not as a society progressed past love triangles? I don't know. Like, usually I say it with firmness, like we as a society have progressed past blank. But in the case of love triangles, I'm asking. I'm asking for the viewers' input, okay? Have we progressed past love triangles? Now, I feel like there's always a place for them, to be fair, but I kind of roll my eyes. Like, it has to be done really well. And by really well, I mean both options, both possibilities, okay, both potential bays need to be on equal footing. The problem with this love triangle is that Paxton is only there because of his looks. Okay, let's be real, okay? Because this season around, there isn't really much of a focus on Devy's academics as well. That's another thing that takes a back seat. There are a lot of personality traits that made the character unique in season 1 that are kind of lost in season 2, unfortunately. But she's less obsessed about her academics, and in fact, it's not until like halfway through the season when she gets suspended for what happens to Sheena, which we'll talk about in a second, that I remember that she's obsessed about her academics, because she realizes that her suspension may go on her permanent record, which would affect whether or not she gets into Princeton. So again, that's something that was lost from season 1. Because she's such an academic person, to me it doesn't quite make sense that she's so infatuated with Paxton, because even though he looks the way he does, like, even I'm watching the show looking respectfully, okay, even though he looks the way he does, there's no like substance there. Like, literally, beauty is literally only skin deep, and beyond that there's not much else. Like, there weren't really many redeeming characteristics or personality traits for Paxton, particularly in this season. And it seemed as though at every turn at every possibility that it could, the show reminded us that he's like several IQ points lower than Devy and doesn't really match up to her on an intellectual level. So to me, that pairing doesn't make sense, and therefore the love triangle kind of falls apart, because I'm not really rooting for her to end up with Paxton to begin with. I did like the aspect of Devy tutoring Paxton, but then I got quickly annoyed by how dependent he became on her tutoring him. I think it is ridiculous at the beginning of the season that he ends up in a car crash or a car accident that leaves him incapable of swimming, and therefore all of his scholarships are gone, and that leaves Paxton thinking that Devy owes him, and that's why he makes her do her homework. How are you still in love with someone after they treat you like that? Paxton sucks. Paxton literally, he tried to force her to do his homework for him, and it took his sister telling him like, nah, boo-boo, you're wrong, for him to realize that he couldn't do that and he needed to earn the grades. And he didn't even realize it because he felt bad for Devy. He felt like he needed to earn the grades, and that's why he changed his mind. So that's 1. And then 2, my guy climbs up Devy's house, gets into her bedroom and like starts fooling around with her, only for him to like try to hide the fact that they're seeing one another because he's embarrassed by by her, and then he tries to turn it on her, being like, yeah, like I don't want anyone to know we're together because you were a two-timer and everyone would think less of me if they knew I went back to you. And I'm like, whoa, he sucks. He literally sucks. And then Devy asks him to the dance, and this is the moment where I'm like crying from cringe. Devy asks him to the dance and he straight up says no. And I'm just like, why are we still rooting for them to be together? Why are you still rooting for, not me, why are you guys still rooting for them to be together? Paxton actually sucks. Like, what redeeming qualities does he have? He's incredibly attractive, that's it. That's literally And then on the other side of the love triangle, you have Ben, who Devy also two-timed. That was unfortunate. I did feel bad for Ben. Like, that's just not fair. She was too busy like chasing after Paxton for some reason, basically just because he's hot, that she didn't realize what she was missing out on with Ben. And their little banter is adorable. I feel like they are the perfect match. They're probably endgame, okay, for the show, let's be real. But in the meantime, we have to go through this back and forth Paxton Ben situation. And again, I asked the viewers, are you still into the love triangle storyline? And if so, why? Let me know down in the comments. I guess the main issue is that once you've established who the main character is going to be with and you've cemented that, there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to go, and so you're kind of stuck with, and they're in a happy relationship and no one wants to see that. They want the mess. So that's why we get these love triangles, but it's very upsetting still. And technically speaking, this wasn't even just a love triangle, this is a love square, because we have the addition of the new character Anisha. Now Anisha is another Indian girl who moves to the school. I actually found it really fascinating seeing how Devy reacted to the entrance of this new Indian girl, and the fact that she realized, like, maybe the fact that everyone thinks I'm uncool isn't just because of racism. Isn't just because of racism, but because I'm actually uncool. Like, it brought up a lot of the insecurities that she had, and maybe she'd been placating herself in her mind, telling herself, oh, it's just because people are racist. Like, that's why people are against me, it's just because they're racist. But in reality, seeing this cooler, you know, more chic Indian girl move into the school and seeing how people were receptive towards her made her doubt herself even more. And I think that's such a shame. There is a lot to be said here in the subtext about how having, you know, people from minority cultures, minority ethnic groups, being the minorities in a population, about how that creates this kind of competition within these individuals, which is a shame. And I think it's the same case for the workforce as well, as education. But when it comes to Devy's reaction, I feel like it is natural, because if being the Indian girl of the school is how a lot of people identify her, it's part of her self-identity, how would she react to seeing another Indian girl in the school that is considered more popular, more cool, and more fun to be around? And again, because they're in the vast minority, and the fact that they are Indian is such a huge part of the way that people identify them, they are immediately put in competition with one another and immediately compared to one another. And comparisons are a regular theme that we see throughout the series, especially when it comes to how Asian or Indian parents treat their children. It's the same thing with African parents, with the whole comparisons thing. Like, why can't you be more like your cousin? Why can't you be more like the neighbor? In the case of Anisha and Devy, they're compared to one another almost instantly because of their cultural backgrounds. But I was really happy to see Devy let go of some of that almost immediately upon realizing how much in common her and Anisha have, and just how great it is to have someone from a similar background to you that can understand the nuances of being an Indian American teenage girl. I really liked seeing the way that they interacted at first and how much they had in common, and the way that they were able to learn off of one another, in particular Devy learning from Anisha and her experiences with her really strict parents. And so to me, it was a massive shame. To me, it was a massive shame. As much as I like Ben, okay, Ben's fun, he's cute, whatever, it was a massive shame to me that they allowed this boy to get in between their newfound friendship. Like, ugh, especially Devy, of course, because it was all Devy getting all jealous about Ben and Anisha getting together. I was just like, girl, you're missing out on the chance to have a friend who knows you and your culture more than anyone else. Like, please don't throw this chance away for Ben. Like, there'll be plenty of Bens, as her friends tell her, there'll be plenty of Bens in Princeton. Like, you can worry about that then, but have fun with Anisha. Like, come on. Another issue arises when during their 24-hour marathon, Devy starts this rumor about Anisha having an eating disorder that manages to spread like wildfire amongst their school. And this, to me, again, is kind of teetering on the edge of having this character be entirely irredeemable. Like, it's a really fine line between having a problematic but lovable lead versus an entirely unlikable, irredeemable main character, because her starting a rumor, even though it was unintentional, about Anisha having an eating disorder, for that to be a plot point, just because she's jealous of Anisha and Ben's newfound friendship, I don't know. When that storyline was playing out, I was kind of side-eyeing Devy like, this is too much. And the fact that she lied, the fact that she was like trying to sabotage the investigation for who actually started the rumor, that just kept digging the hole deeper and deeper. I was like, man, this character's really hard to root for when she's doing dumb stuff like this. And what made it even worse is that at the end of each of the episodes that explore the theme of eating disorders, we do have that kind of notice by Netflix, you know, talking about who you can reach out to if you do experience these similar issues. Whilst I do commend Netflix for having that kind of warning there and trying to help out the viewers of the show who may be impacted by this issue, I think it adds to the fact that what Devy did was so deplorable because it emphasizes how much of a real life issue this is that affects people all around the world. Okay, so now let's take a break from Devy and her drama and her mess and focus on some of the other side characters of the show. We do of course have her best friends Eleanor and Fabiola, and once again they kind of take a back seat this season. We do have Eleanor's relationship with that actor guy who's doing way too much. He's doing way too much, buying off of Robert Downey Jr.'s Etsy store, getting a rash on his wrist, like way too much. There seems to be an attempt to tread into a kind of abusive relationships with the whole storyline surrounding Eleanor and her new boyfriend, which I found interesting. They kind of dial it down way back, like it's not trying to be a 13 Reasons Why, but you do get to see a hint of the exploration of a bad relationship that has abusive elements to it, and her friends trying to warn her that, listen, this guy is not for you, the way that he's treating you isn't right. And that's something that I appreciated, especially again considering that a lot of teenage girls are going to be watching this series and they may have elements of that in their early relationships that they can relate to, and maybe it could help open their eyes to see those warning signs. So I appreciate that being explored in this series, but again they tread very lightly. It's not trying to be a 13 Reasons Why. So yeah, that whole theme is kind of a blink and you'll miss it, and it doesn't help that Eleanor as a character very much takes a back seat, as I said, to this whole season, so it's not really given enough time to explore in any real depth. Then you also have the character of Fabiola, and last season round she actually came out to her mother as being a lesbian. This whole season is basically about her trying to discover what it means to be a lesbian teenage girl who still has the interest that she did before. She still loves her robotics club, but she also enjoys being in a relationship with that blonde girl who looks like Ruby Rose. She's trying to figure out how to fit all of these things together whilst being a part of the queer community in their high school, and people keep kind of pulling her and pushing her in all these different directions. But I really like the fact that in the end she decided that she can still be true to herself. She doesn't have to be in the know about all of these pop culture references within the queer community. She can still engage with her robotics class. She can still be dedicated to the things that she loved beforehand. It just means that now she has a girlfriend that she really cares about, and she can introduce that girlfriend to her mother. And even though her mother has the best of intentions, maybe sometimes she's not going to say the best things, and that's okay. That's something that they can work on. So yeah, I really enjoyed her storyline. I feel like, again, this is something that is very relatable to a lot of teens or young people who may be watching this show and trying to figure out what their role is or where they fit in within their local queer community. And maybe they don't always feel like they do fit in, but this show suggests that there is no specific box that you have to tick. You can just be yourself in all of the aspects that that encompasses. And finally, we need to talk about Devy's beautiful cousin, Kamala. I love Kamala. She is such a ray of sunshine. Oh my goodness, I love her to bits. But she has started this new tenure at this lab with this very prestigious scientist who is like an expert in their field. But she's realizing the realities of being the only female scientist within this lab and the disadvantages that comes with, the kind of isolation that comes with when you're not part of the in-group in a workplace. And I would really apply this to like any workplace where especially it's male dominated. And again, I really do like the exploration of this theme in this season because it's very real. It's very real, and you see it in all different industries, but I like the fact that it kind of delved into what it's like in the scientific industry, and how Kamala is trying to deal with the fact that she is such an outsider within this group. Her boyfriend slash pre-fiance does give her the advice of, you know, trying to fit in, playing the game so that she can be a part of the group and it can benefit her in terms of her career as well. But even that doesn't work out because in the end there is just this boundary that comes with being a female scientist in her case. And even when she makes this huge discovery for their field of research, she doesn't get the recognition that she deserves even after playing the game that was very undignified for her. So I really enjoyed that storyline. Again, I feel like it has real world applications whilst at the same time being explored in the show's kind of signature cheeky, funny, clever way. But if there was one element of Kamala's storyline that I wasn't as much of a fan of, it would be her kind of seeming to want to break up with her pre-fiance. I'm not okay with that. We need a conference. I'm not okay with that. Okay, first of all, he is insanely attractive. Why are we even contemplating it? I know what I said about Paxton, blah, 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 but they have more in common. He's insanely attractive and he didn't do anything horribly wrong. I feel like when it comes to this show, they try to push and pull you in different directions by making these characters do like dumb, superficial stuff that wouldn't actually be of consequence. And in the meantime, you have a main character who's doing like horrible crimes. Like she's doing horrible things like two-timing guys and, you know, spreading horrible, you know, damaging rumors about people. I feel like that's way worse. But in the case of Kamala's pre-fiance, like he just said something a little bit problematic about playing the game, and I tried to encourage her to just let it go. And I would have just fixed that with her standing up for herself and trying to get him to realize that she can't let it go. She needs to stand up for herself in this field, otherwise she'll be pushed around for the entirety of her career. Like just have the talk, like have her communicate with him instead of trying to entertain this new romance with Devy's teacher. I'm like, no, can we just work on a relationship for once? Like, can we actually communicate and talk for this relationship to work? But no, now she's nervous about his parents coming round and maybe there's going to be a proposal and we never get it because she ends up going to the staff room at Devy's winter ball. And I'm just like, no, no, I wanted her to stick this one out to actually see if they can deal with conflict. Imagine that. Imagine a show actually showing us a relationship dealing with conflict successfully. Whatever, we can't have nice things. And finally, we need to talk about Netflix committing yet another cardinal sin in the form of its paper bag test for the casting of this show. Listen, I will commend the show for having decent Asian representation, especially Southeast Asian representation, and people who are of a deeper skin tone like the main character, and also Devy's teacher as well, who's an actor who's been featured in the Mindy project previously. So I appreciate that about this series and how Mindy Kaling was really paying attention to that. But as a black person, okay, couldn't help but notice that all the black people on the show could pass the paper bag test. Okay, I mean, we have the compulsory mixed race best friend in the form of Fabiola, which is absolutely fine, like, okay, but then you also have this one deeper skinned black character who grated on my nerves. I was like, okay, so she's a plus size black character, but she's kind of acting as this like PR team for Fabiola and her girlfriend, and she is so grating. And like, I guess I should be happy with the scraps that I'm handed in terms of representation, but I'm not. So with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Never Have I Ever season 2 a 7 out of 10. again. But that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Never Have I Ever Season 2, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of the series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!